Okay, so here we are in part 4 of the IS number 21 notes. We're about to do the do section on statdist.org. We're going to analysis, hypothesis testing, and then mean one sample. And I'm sure you were kind of expecting that to be mean matched pairs, so I'm going to show you why that's not mean matched pairs. All right, so here we are at StatDisk. I have just clicked in the top left-hand corner, the StatDisk Online. Takes me back to kind of the standard StatDisk page. You could tell this is the data from the last problem. We don't need it, and we're not entering any of our own data in, right? We weren't actually told what the data values were, what those differences for each student were. We just have the sample statistics. So it doesn't matter about the data that's entered there. So let's go to analysis, hypothesis testing, and let's see what mean matched pairs says. It asks us which data sets we'd like to compare. So in order to use mean matched pairs, you actually have to be able to enter data like we did with the caffeine and placebo pills problem. Since we don't have the data here, we instead have to go to analysis, hypothesis testing, and mean one sample, because it's essentially as if they've already found that difference for us and given us the sample statistics. We just have the one sample. So we're going to mean one sample. Okay, so we come up here, we enter our significance level is 0.05, that's fine. Then our claimed mean, again, we look at our hypothesis. The null hypothesis is that the difference is 0 words. That's always going to be the case. So our claimed mean is 0. We do not know the population standard deviation. We skip that. The sample size was 32, right? We had 32 seniors, so N is 32. And then the sample mean is given to us, X bar diff. So X bar sub diff is 1.5. That's what we're entering here, 1.5. And the sample standard deviation they also gave us was 2.7. Again, that's right here. Okay, so the last thing we have to remember to do, if we hit evaluate at this point, oops, I entered an O instead of a 0. Sorry, guys. Make sure you hit 0. If I hit evaluate at this point, it tells me my alternative hypothesis up here is that mu is not equal to the hypothesized mu. All right, now that's not what my alternative hypothesis was. It was supposed to be that the difference is greater than 0. So I need to come back over here and change this population mean not equal to claimed mean to be population mean to be greater than claimed mean. The claimed mean, again, being that it's 0. Now, if I had evaluate this time, I've got the correct alternative hypothesis up there. That's a really easy mistake to make, so make sure you're careful. Okay, so I have my test statistic and my p-value. I'm going to write those down. So T is 3.14270. T is 3.14270. Then my p-value is that 0.00184. 0.00184. All right, so obviously that p-value is less than alpha. Remember, I compare my p-value to alpha in order to make my conclusion. It apparently is very, very unlikely to get sample results like we got if the null hypothesis is true. And so in that case, since it's so unlikely, we're going to reject that the null is true. So since p-value equal to 0.00184 is less than alpha equal to 0.05, we reject the null. Now, we could say we have convincing evidence that strategy 2 has more words remembered than strategy 1. But I'm going to go back up and use the statement here. And it's asking, so we have convincing evidence that strategy 2 improves memory. And that's what I'm going to say, okay? So we have convincing evidence that strategy 2 improves memory, right? I've put it into the context of the situation in a way that makes sense to people who do not know statistics. But just to make it really clear to you guys, that mu diff represents the true mean difference. So my alternative hypothesis, the true mean difference in words remembered is greater than 0. That's putting my alternative hypothesis into words. Now, that true mean difference in words remembered is greater than 0. That doesn't mean as much to someone who does not know statistics. The way I actually stated it up here is better. So this is really what we want to go with. But just to be clear, this is what backs that up. That true mean difference being greater than 0 does tell us that the strategy 2 improves memory. Okay, so then there's a mistake on my paper. It will not be on your paper. These are the big ideas for section 9.4. So I tried to correct that to a 4. This is inference for a difference in means for paired data. So notice paired and matched are used interchangeably. Okay, so we learned 2 new procedures. We have a 1 sample t-test for mu diff and a 1 sample t-interval for mu diff. Now, I probably should have interchanged those because we did the interval first. Sorry. Not thinking clearly here. We did the interval first and then the test. The conditions have stayed the same. We still have the random, 10% and normal conditions. Again, we're still using statdisc.org for the do step. Again, please make sure that you understand how to read the output because that is what will be on your next test. I won't be actually asking you to enter anything into StatDisc and find the output, but I'll give you the output and ask you to interpret it. And then finally, in the conclusion, make sure you are careful with your context. I noticed that in this last test, we had a lot of people getting confused. They would say, we have convincing evidence for the null. And then, they probably put the null into words, so that the difference is 0 in this case. We never say we have convincing evidence for the null. We never accept the null. We only reject or fail to reject the null. If we fail to reject the null, then we do not have convincing evidence against the null. And I know that's a double negative. We do not have convincing evidence against the null, not an against. But that's the way it has to be said. Unless you want to replace against the null with for the alternative. So if we had if we had failed to reject the null here, we would have not had convincing evidence that strategy 2 improves memory. And this is the alternative, okay? All right, guys, I think that is it for chapter 9. Please let me know if you have any questions.